Great. So my name's Simon Hobson.
So I think it's always challenging when we're using terms like populist. How do we define populist? It's a term that we can use to describe all kinds of political parties who speak in different ways about different things. I think the kind of populism that you seem to be referring to there is that kind of populism of the right wing, which tends to talk about kind of the state and that kind of that state-based identity, whether that is in the UK context, whether that's Britishness, whether that's Englishness, and the conflation of those two things. So that kind of right-wing populism tends to focus on that state identity, and in that kind of rhetoric, other identities within the state certainly tend to be kind of marginalised or talked down. I should say, however, that some scholars have talked about minority nationalists as being populists. So again, it depends on how you want to use that label and where you find your evidence of populism. So it's a tricky term. I think there is a trend across Europe of this state nationalism, and this idea that goes along with that actually the state, it's the nation state, the nation and the state kind of go together, they coincide, and that any other claims to national identity or self-determination within the state are therefore less legitimate. Certainly there is a trend that we see across Europe, but also in many other places around the world. And that does then have an impact on who are your nationalists? In one sense, that is a state nationalism. They wouldn't call it that. Usually it's called more as patriotism or love for the country, but it is a form of nationalism. But that, from that perspective, nationalism is something negative which you see on the periphery and which is something to be rejected. Whereas, of course, if you're in that periphery, nationalism is not necessarily kind of something that isn't legitimate. It's grounded in a different sense of national identity, a sense of belonging, often rooted in historical precedents and so on. So again, these terms are positive or negative depending on who uses them in what context, but certainly I think we're seeing a trend of this reassertion of state nationalism, of state centralisation, and that does have implications for minority nationalism, if you want to call it that.
Something that I've been trying to understand myself. Now, when I've lived and worked in places like Colombia, nationalism and being a nationalist and being proud of being Colombian is very much a day-to-day activity for everybody. And yet, I guess because of Europe's history with nationalism, it's used in a more derogatory term generally within European context. So I've experienced that, as I said, with Quebec as well, where to be a nationalist is seen as a bad thing. Yeah. So, and I think that's certainly something we see with Wales, is that often a unionist party or a unionist MP or politician will throw at anybody that is asking for more rights for Scotland or Wales. They'll throw the term, "Oh, you're a nationalist," as though it's a bad thing. Yeah. Well, I'm interested in looking at, really why that term has that different meaning in the context of the United Kingdom, and also why there seems, as you've alluded to in your previous response, why there seems to be that blindness to unthinkingly supporting the United Kingdom, why that isn't nationalism to some people's minds.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, again, it's just that trickiness of the term. I think nationalism, because of its historical experience and context, is often seen as a negative thing, as a form of division, of exclusion, and absolutely it can take that form. maybe because I'm speaking to you as somebody who lives in Wales, who thinks of myself as a Welsh first and foremost, nationalism for me is also able to be something positive. It can be inclusive and accommodating, and something that evolves. So I think, again, it is something that doesn't have to be negative and a force for bad. I think it very much depends on how you define your own identity and how you practice that identity. And I think, it can be something to be celebrated, because it kind of is grounded in a sense of just being different. And that difference in and of itself isn't a bad thing. I think it can be very enriching and something to be celebrated. So I get the difficulties of nationalism as a term and how it's often used, but it's not the only way in which nationalism and kind of national identities underpinning that can be used.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more conversations with people who want to build the future of Wales. And do go and find, like and enjoy new.wales across all your favourite social media channels.